Clara Mitchell's disappearance began like a faint whisper, the kind of story that feels too unreal to belong in a small, trusting town. She was 24, known by neighbors for her warm smile and quiet manner. Every weekday evening, she drove the same route home from her office job, a simple routine that had never once been interrupted. That routine was the first thing people noticed when she vanished. Her car was discovered in the driveway as if she had just pulled in. The door on the driver's side stood ajar, swaying slightly when the wind passed. Inside, her purse rested on the passenger seat, neatly zipped, with her wallet, keys, and phone untouched. It was as though she had stepped out for a moment and then evaporated into the night air. When her family realized she hadn't come inside, panic struck quickly. They searched the yard, called her name, even walked the length of the street thinking she may have wandered off. Nothing. The police arrived soon after, combing through the vehicle for signs of a break-in, a struggle, anything that might explain why a young woman had simply disappeared. Yet the scene gave them nothing but silence. No fingerprints that didn't already belong there. No footprints on the ground. Not even a stray hair or piece of fabric out of place. The house remained untouched, the door locked from within, the lights off, as if Clara had never reached her doorstep. The news spread faster than anyone could have expected. This was the kind of town where people knew one another by name, where neighbors brought food to each other's porches, and where children still rode bicycles unsupervised until the sun went down. Nothing like this had ever happened there. Fear began to ripple through the streets, and a new sense of unease settled like a heavy fog. Mothers kept their children close, fathers walked the perimeters of their yards at night, and people who had once left their doors unlocked began sliding bolts across every entrance. The initial search was massive. Officers and volunteers spread out across nearby fields and wooded areas, calling her name until their voices broke. Helicopters circled overhead, shining lights across open farmland and narrow back roads. Every riverbank was checked, every abandoned property combed through. Still, no Clara. With each passing day, the search became less about hope and more about desperation. Theories began to form, whispered among neighbors, each one darker than the last. Some believed she had been followed home by a stranger. Others thought someone close to her had orchestrated the disappearance. Yet none of these guesses carried proof. The strangest part was how normal everything appeared up to the final moment. Clara's routine gave no hint of fear. Traffic cameras captured her car moving along her usual route. Witnesses saw her at a gas station, quietly filling her tank, offering a polite nod to another driver. She appeared calm, unaware of any danger, until the last seconds of her day disappeared into nothing. It was as if an invisible hand had plucked her from her driveway and erased her from existence. That eerie absence became the first detail that unsettled investigators, a missing person case without a trace, an ordinary life vanishing without sound or struggle. It was only the beginning of a mystery that would grow darker with every passing clue. The discovery in the woods came by chance, yet it shifted the entire case into darker territory. It was a crisp morning when a jogger, taking a trail just outside the town limits, noticed a patch of earth that seemed uneven. Leaves and branches had been clumsily scattered over it, as though someone wanted to disguise freshly disturbed soil. At first, it looked like nothing more than an animal burrow, but something metallic caught the runner's eye. Half, buried in the dirt, was a phone case, cracked at the corner and decorated with a small sticker. Later, it would be confirmed as belonging to Clara Mitchell. When investigators arrived, they uncovered more. Just beneath the surface was a blood-stained scarf, knotted tightly, as if it had been pulled in a violent struggle. Nearby, a bracelet glinted faintly in the sunlight, a piece of jewelry Clara's family immediately recognized. The grim scene resembled a shallow grave, but there was no body, no clear sign of what had happened. The placement of the objects seemed deliberate, like someone had wanted the items to be found, yet left the most important detail missing. Forensic teams examined every inch of the site. The soil revealed small traces of blood that matched Clara's DNA. No other remains surfaced. No footprints, no tire tracks, no cigarette butts or pieces of fabric that might belong to a suspect. It was as though the earth had swallowed the answers whole. Detectives debated whether the scene was genuine evidence or a staged performance meant to send a message. The unsettling thought grew. Someone was playing a game, taunting both the police and Clara's loved ones. The town's atmosphere turned from fearful to paranoid. Rumors swirled at an uncontrollable pace. Neighbors whispered that the killer might be someone living among them, someone blending into daily routines while hiding a monstrous secret. People scanned familiar faces with new suspicion, questioning even longtime friends and co-workers. The once quiet streets became charged with tension, every glance carrying unspoken doubt. For Clara's family, the discovery was both devastating and confusing. On one hand, the presence of her belongings confirmed she had been at the site. On the other, the absence of her body meant they were left suspended between hope and despair. Without a body, there was no closure, no certainty of her death. Some clung to the idea that she was still alive, held captive somewhere. Others feared the items were a cruel confirmation of the worst outcome. As investigators widened their search, the woods themselves seemed to hold secrets. Teams walked mile after mile through thick undergrowth, combing ravines and shallow creeks. Dogs were brought in, their noses pressed to the earth, yet no fresh trail emerged. Every direction seemed to end in silence. The mystery of the staged grave began to overshadow the initial disappearance. This was no simple missing person case anymore. It carried the signature of something far more calculated, something that hinted at control, planning, and perhaps even ritual. The discovery raised more questions than answers, and the community was forced to accept an uncomfortable truth. The person responsible for Clara's disappearance was not only methodical but also bold enough to leave evidence as if daring anyone to follow the trail. As the investigation dragged on, attention turned toward Clara's private world. At first glance, her life appeared ordinary, the life of a young woman with steady work, close family ties, and no enemies anyone could name. But when detectives gained access to her laptop and phone records, a darker pattern slowly emerged. Late at night, Clara had been visiting obscure online forums, hidden spaces where strangers gathered to discuss survival tactics, endurance challenges, and disturbing games that blurred the line between reality and fantasy. These were not harmless hobbies. Many of the conversations were rooted in control, submission, and psychological torment. The more investigators read, the more they realized Clara had become fascinated with topics far from her day-to-day life. Buried within those threads was a username that appeared again and again, an account that went by the unsettling name, The Watcher. The messages exchanged between Clara and this person stood out. They were calculated, laced with suggestions and questions designed to draw her in. Some sounded harmless, like casual talk about resilience and strength, but others hinted at more sinister ideas. "How much fear can you handle?" one message asked. Another suggested she was ready for a real test. The correspondence became longer over time, with Clara responding more frequently, as though she had formed a strange trust in this faceless figure. The discovery unsettled everyone working the case. The idea that Clara might have willingly interacted with someone who later became her captor shifted the investigation into new territory. Was she manipulated into meeting this person? Did she know them in real life and not realize their true identity online? Detectives tried to trace the digital trail, but the Watcher had left no footprints. Every account was carefully shielded, emails routed through layers of anonymous servers. Whoever it was, they were meticulous, experienced, and determined to stay hidden. As this information was revealed, the family's pain deepened. They struggled to reconcile the Clara they knew with a version of her uncovered in the investigation. To them, she had always been careful and cautious, someone who would never willingly walk into danger. Yet the messages told another story, one of curiosity and vulnerability, where she had opened herself to someone promising something mysterious. The unsettling part was how ordinary the start of it seemed. It began like countless online interactions, harmless and forgettable, until it twisted into something predatory. The public reacted with shock as the details leaked. Parents worried about their children spending time online, realizing how easy it was for a stranger to manipulate trust. Others blamed Clara, believing she had invited danger by seeking it out. But those who studied the case closely saw something more chilling. She had been groomed, slowly and deliberately, until the line between her choices and her captor's influence blurred beyond recognition. By the time investigators pieced together the full extent of her secret online life, it was too late. The emails had stopped abruptly just before her disappearance, the final exchange left unfinished. The Watcher's last message was short, cryptic, and haunting. It simply read, "Are you ready?" The breakthrough came months later when an anonymous tip directed investigators to an abandoned farmhouse on the outskirts of town. The property had long been left to decay, its windows boarded, its roof sagging, and weeds climbing up the crumbling walls. From the outside, it looked like another forgotten shell, a relic of the past with nothing to offer. But the moment investigators stepped inside, they realized the house had been used for something far more sinister than shelter. The air was thick with mildew and rot, yet beneath the surface of neglect was evidence of recent activity. Dust patterns showed where footsteps had disturbed the floor. Empty food wrappers and water bottles were scattered in corners, and in the basement, the true horror revealed itself. The basement was a space no one could easily forget. The walls were covered in frantic writing, jagged lines of text scribbled over peeling paint. Most of the phrases repeated the same ideas: control, fear, obedience. Some sentences were written in large, furious strokes, while others appeared neatly printed, as though cataloging twisted rules. In the center of the room stood a rusted metal chair, its arms fitted with restraints. Chains clinked when investigators touched them, a sound that echoed through the silence like a scream frozen in time. Around the chair were several cameras on tripods, each aimed directly at the seat, each ready to capture whatever unfolded there. What investigators found next was even worse. Dozens of unmarked tapes were stacked along one wall, stored inside cracked plastic cases. When they were played, the footage confirmed every fear. Clara was there, alive but trapped, seated in the chair under blinding lights. She appeared exhausted, her face pale and her body thin, as though weeks had passed in captivity. The recordings showed her enduring cruel psychological tests, moments designed to push her mind to the breaking point. On one tape, she was forced to sit in silence while distorted sounds blared through speakers. On another, she was confronted with timed tasks that punished her when she failed. The torment was not physical violence in the obvious sense, but relentless psychological torture, crafted to strip away her sense of self. Even more chilling was the discovery that Clara had not been the only victim. Earlier tapes revealed other faces, men and women whose identities remained unknown. Each appeared terrified, each subjected to the same ritual of control. The sequence of recordings suggested a disturbing pattern. This was not a single crime, but a long-standing practice, perfected over time. Clara's ordeal was just one chapter in a series of horrors carried out by whoever called themselves the Watcher. The tapes ended abruptly. The final footage showed Clara weaker than ever, her eyes hollow, her voice almost gone. Then, without explanation, the recordings stopped. There was no conclusion, no indication of what happened after. Her fate remained a blank space, one that haunted investigators and her family alike. They were left staring into the void of what the basement represented, a chamber built for cruelty, a stage designed to record human suffering, and a chilling reminder that the person responsible was still out there, skilled enough to vanish without leaving behind even a shadow of themselves. Despite the farmhouse discovery, the case offered no resolution. Investigators had Clara's belongings, her blood, and the horrifying tapes, but they did not have her body. Without it, they could not confirm her death, only her suffering. The absence became its own kind of evidence, an unbearable silence that deepened the mystery. Search teams scoured every inch of land surrounding the farmhouse, draining ponds, digging fields, and sweeping abandoned buildings, but each search ended the same way, with nothing. It was as though Clara had been swallowed by the earth. The Watcher, the shadow responsible for everything, seemed to evaporate in the aftermath. No new communications surfaced, no digital fingerprints reappeared, and no sightings ever held weight. Whoever this person was, they had vanished with precision, leaving behind only the haunting images burned into the tapes. The lack of closure tormented Clara's family. They lived in limbo, caught between hope and despair, imagining endless scenarios of what might have become of her. For her mother, every knock on the door sparked a fragile hope that Clara would be standing there, alive and free. For others, the fear was darker, that she had been discarded somewhere no one would ever find. As the months turned into years, the case became more than a tragedy for one family. It became a legend whispered through the town. Neighbors avoided driving near the farmhouse, even after authorities boarded it up. Parents warned their children never to venture into the woods where her belongings had been found. Strangers came to visit the town, drawn by curiosity, standing in hushed silence outside the places connected to Clara's disappearance. What should have been private grief turned into a public fascination, the kind that mixes fear with obsession. The most chilling part was the sense that it could happen again. The tapes had shown multiple victims before Clara, their identities unknown, their stories untold. If the Watcher had vanished once, What stopped them from resurfacing somewhere else under a new name, a new mask? That question lingered heavily over law enforcement. Every new missing person report in the region drew immediate comparisons. Every unsolved disappearance seemed to echo the same possibility, that the watcher had returned. Yet proof never followed, leaving only dread and speculation. Time did not heal the wound, it only made it deeper. For those who knew Clara, there was no end to the nightmare. Each unanswered question gnawed at them. Why had she been chosen? Why were her belongings arranged like clues? Why did the tape stop so suddenly? It was not just about one woman's fate anymore, but about the darkness behind human nature, a darkness that did not need reason to exist. The Watcher represented something more terrifying than a single predator. They embodied the possibility that cruelty itself could be patient, methodical, and invisible, living among ordinary people without anyone noticing. The story of Clara Mitchell remains unresolved, a case that refuses to rest quietly. It leaves behind a lesson that unsettles everyone who hears it. Evil does not always come with warning, and sometimes the monsters we fear are not distant strangers but the ones clever enough to hide in plain sight. It is this uncertainty, this chilling absence of answers, that makes the case so unforgettable and so deeply disturbing. It is why even today, many still say that thinking about Clara's disappearance is enough to make them question humanity itself. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more chilling true crime stories, make sure to hit the like button, it really helps us bring you more content. Don't forget to subscribe to Crime Uncovered and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. Stay safe, and stay curious.